The Orioles have dominated the Rays all year, and that continued over the weekend, winning the series, taking 2 of 3, and remaining in first place in the AL East. I'll recap all 3 games for the O's at the Trop coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, August 12th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles series win over the Rays at the Trop this weekend as the O's take 2 out of 3 from Tampa Bay. I'll get you what went right, what went wrong, and a shout out to for all 3 games of the series, which included a 4-1 win on Friday, a 7-5 win on Saturday, and a 2-1 loss on Sunday. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Supply House. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. So we're going to recap an Orioles series win as they take 2 out of 3 from the Tampa Bay Rays over the weekend. Weren't quite able to finish off the sweep on Sunday, but still with the win Saturday, they became the first team in Major League Baseball to 70 wins. They currently sit at 70-49. As I am recording here late on Sunday afternoon, the Yankees and the Rangers are still going in game 3 of their series. They were rained out Friday. They split a doubleheader on Saturday. It is currently 8-6 Yankees in the top of the 8th inning. If the Yankees do hold on, it'll be an even tie at the top of the AL East, but because the Orioles have the head-to-head record over the Yankees, they're still technically in first. If the Rangers can come back and win this one, of course, the O's will have a 1-game lead in the division heading into Monday. But either way, we're going to recap a series. First, just want to let you know that thank you for those who reached out. Just had to take a little time off from the podcast that last week. That's why there was not an episode up on Thursday or Friday. Had a few things going on. You probably heard me talk about it the last 2 weeks. Been dealing with some sickness. My voice was just going and going and going. The 2 days off was huge for recovering the voice as well. And also my dog Ruby, may or may not have talked about her before on this podcast, did have to get some surgery this week. She had to be very closely monitored throughout the week. She's doing much better at this point. But with all that stuff combined, it seemed like a good time to just take a few days off. But we're back. We'll recap this Orioles-Rays series. And then on tomorrow's episode, after the O's have the off day today, kind of get to everything I missed, all the roster moves, the injuries, the updates on Grayson Rodriguez, all that good stuff comes up on tomorrow's episode. But today it's an Orioles series win, and we start with the victory on Friday. Opening this series with a W. Final score from Friday, Orioles 4 and Rays 1. Now, what went right from Friday's win? Well, that was, of course, Zach Eflin against his old team. The Orioles acquiring Eflin from the Rays at the trade deadline for 3 prospects. And honestly, he has been great through his 3 starts with Baltimore. And this one, I don't think there's much of an argument. Even though all 3 have been pretty good, this was the best work that Eflin has done in an Oriole uniform. 7 scoreless innings pitching back at the Trop on just 4 hits. He struck out 7 and walked only 1, which is the Zach Eflin special, through only 94 pitches, and the Rays only had 5 hard hit balls against the veteran right-hander in this game. It was once again high cutter usage. Now, the cutter was his number 2 pitch when he was in Tampa. The Orioles have turned it into his number 1 pitch, and that pitch has just been incredible. He got 7 whiffs on 13 swings to go along with 10 called strikes and 2 foul balls of the 30 cutters that he threw as his most used pitch on Friday night. Just was having that cutter dance around the zone pretty much anywhere he wanted it. Still threw the sinker a solid amount. We know it's not a swing and miss pitch. It's more of a ground ball pitch, but he was getting ground balls with that sinker. And I felt like of the 3 starts, this was the best curveball that Eflin had. The curveball was the weapon that allowed him to finish 6th in AL Cy Young voting last year in his first year with Tampa. The curveball's taken like a sharp left turn in terms of effectiveness. It's been one of his worst pitches this year after being his best pitch last year. But it's starting to come around a little bit in the 3 starts with Baltimore. This is the best I thought it looked. He just had everything working. And again, 7 more strikeouts. Eflin had only 1 start of 7 Ks. That was his season high with the Rays before he came to Baltimore. He has now struck out 7 in 2 of his 3 starts with the Orioles. So even though he's still, a ground ball pitcher who's throwing strikes and not walking guys, he's becoming a little more of a strikeout pitcher, and it's not really sacrificing anything else, which has been really fun to watch. I was on Eflin before the trade. I loved the acquisition. It is clearly the number one addition the Orioles have made at the deadline so far. One of the biggest impacts that I think any addition has made that anyone picked up at the trade deadline so far this year. He has been superb, and it had to be fun kind of pitching against his old team at his old ballpark. And he's throwing more changeups now too. Like that pitch is looking nasty at times. Really liking what I see from Zach Eflin. What went wrong on Friday? Well, it was that the Orioles' hottest hitters coming in really did not produce in that Friday game. Jackson Holliday, Gunnar Henderson, Anthony Santander, I think the argument would be those are 3 of their hottest hitters, if not the 3 hottest hitters. They combined to go 0 for 12 with 4 strikeouts and just 1 walk in that game on Friday. They really could not figure out, mostly in that game, Zach Littell, who pitched 5 innings, and then a couple of arms out of the Rays bullpen as well. But here's the thing, despite not getting production from those 3, the rest of the Oriole lineup came through in this game, and that was the huge part. They got 1 in the first, 2 in the 5th, and 1 in the 6th. Those are the 4 runs the Orioles scored on 11 hits in this ball game. And it's because you got a leadoff home run from Colton Cowser, kind of picking up right where Gunnar Henderson left off with those leadoff homers. You got a big 2-run bloop single from Ryan O'Hearn with the bases loaded and 2 outs in the 5th to give the Orioles just a little bit of breathing room in that game. And you got 3 more hits from Eloy Jimenez, who is still not lifting the ball. He's still hitting a lot of grounders, but his grounders are finding holes right now. Now, Jimenez did not play on Saturday. He was back in there in the lineup on Sunday, picked up a hit and a walk, but he went 3 for 4 with 3 singles on Friday. Eloy Jimenez is now 12 for 24. That is a 500 batting average in an Oriole uniform. I'm worried that he's going to come crashing back down because, again, he is still hitting grounders, and it is not sustainable to hit exclusively ground balls and hit, obviously not 500, but even anything close to 300. The BABIP gods will come for you. So we'll see if he's able to lift the ball a little bit better. But at this point, you'll take the hits, and he is certainly providing them for the Orioles. Now, the shout out for Friday, well, that goes to Cedric Mullins. Now, Mullins had a really good July. He kind of rebounded his season, had an 800 OPS in that month, but he was really struggling again in early August. And even with 2 hits on Friday, Cedric Mullins is still just 4 for 26 in the month of August. But he had a couple of hits Friday. He actually had a hit in the 9th inning on Sunday. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I think the biggest thing of all of this was the home run that Mullins hit in the game on Friday. Solo home run in the 6th inning, put the Orioles up 4-0 at the time. But the best part of it was it came off a left-hander. Lefty Richard Lovelady had come out of the Rays bullpen, and Mullins hit a home run off of him. And that is huge because not only has Cedric Mullins been terrible against lefties this year, but he didn't have a home run against a left-hander all season until Friday night. Took Lovelady 106 off the bat, 426 feet off that Rays tank in right center field at the Trop. Even with the homer, he's still hitting 147 with a 253 slug and a 15 WRC plus against left-handed pitching this year. That's how bad Mullins has been against southpaws. The reason why Mullins has been good in the past is even when he gave up switch hitting, he was still hitting lefties, even though he was purely hitting from the left side of the plate. That hasn't been the case this season. Now, Mullins is still going to play against righties, and he's been an above-average big league hitter against right-handers, and he's playing amazing defense. The catch he made in the gap to end the game Saturday, even though he didn't have to dive or anything, it had a 20% catch probability. It was a miraculous play, and Mullins constantly does that in center field for the Orioles. But if he can even sniff anything close to some sort of production against lefties, and hopefully that home run on Friday kicks him off. Not that Richard Lovelady is one of the nastiest lefties in baseball, but it's still a left-hander. That could be huge for the Orioles lineup with the ability to just throw him in there a few times against lefties, get that defense in center. That makes this Orioles team even better. And it was really just a complete performance by the O's with a 4-1 win to kick off the series on Friday. And then they turned around and they won the series on Saturday. However, the win was not nearly as straightforward. Things got a little bit dicey late in Saturday's win, but coming up next, I'll tell you how the Orioles still managed to hold on to clinch the series. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com. Order supplies from the website that's made for the skilled trades. Find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands in just a couple clicks at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com gives you 24/7 access to a huge selection of plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the U.S. Need help with an order? Get industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team and talk to a real person every time. And there's great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry professionals can join their free TradeMaster program for free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust the TradeMaster program to deliver results. Apply for your membership today and get a competitive edge on every order at supplyhouse.com/TM. Save money and time when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by the DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? Well, you get the latter with the DK Law Group. DK Law Group is a Maryland-based law firm who is redefining the legal process with their modern approach. The DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech savvy, they treat clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. And they know that speed is key. By leveraging technology, DK Law Group streamlines the process to serve you better and faster. So contact the DK Law Group today at dklawmd.com. And Locked On Orioles listeners can call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. So the Orioles got the win to open up the series on Friday, and then they followed up with a victory on Saturday to clinch the series, winning Game 2 of this set against the Rays by a score of 7-5. Let's start with what went right for the Orioles in that Saturday win. Well, that is the 3-hit club that the Orioles put together in that game. The O's popped out 15 hits. You could argue they probably should have scored more than 7 runs on 15 hits, but when you have 15 hits, a lot of guys are going to be contributing. And 5 different Orioles had multi-hit games, including 4 of them putting up 3 hits each. Colton Cowser, 3 for 6 with a double. Gunnar Henderson, 3 for 5. Adley Rutschman, 3 for 5 with 2 doubles and an RBI. And Ryan Mountcastle, 3 for 5 with 3 runs driven in. And those guys hit 1, 3, 4, and 5 in the Oriole order on Saturday night. And it wasn't a huge amount of extra base hits, but they just kept hitting. And I think the biggest 3-hit game out of those 4 was the one for Adley Rutschman. Not only was it his first 3-hit game since June 20th against the Yankees, it's been only almost 2 months since he had 3 hits in a game. It was also Adley's first multi-double game of the season. He hit 2 doubles in this one, first time he had done that in 2024. So honestly, a fantastic sign because Adley, listen, he hit 132 with a OPS that was in the 400s in the month of July. He is now hitting about 315 with an OPS well over 800 in the month of August. That is much more like it for Adley Rutschman. For Ryan Mountcastle, hey, he's on a 6-game hitting streak, his first 3-hit game of August. That was nice to see for Mountie to be able to come through. He also, drove in 3 runs. That was huge for the Orioles. Had a big infield single off the pitcher that extended the lead in the top of the 8th inning. Came up with a 2-run single in the first when the Orioles kind of jumped all over Drew Rasmussen. He was kind of like a rehab-ish start in the majors for Rasmussen, just coming back from an injury. He only gave the Rays 1 inning, and the O's got him for 3 runs on 4 hits in the first, and Mountcastle's hit was a big part of that. Then you kind of move down the list. You go to Colton Cowser, who is now hitting over 330 with a slugging percentage over 550 and a 170 WRC plus and a 14% barrel rate since the Orioles moved Cowser to the leadoff spot in that final game against the Padres back on July 28th. Since Brandon Hyde made that lineup switch, Cowser has been on fire, and he continued that on Saturday. And then for Gunnar, It already became his third 3-hit game of August. And guess what? Gunnar had 3 more hits on Sunday. That's right. He had 2 singles and a double in Sunday's game. It through August 11th, 11 days of the month, Gunnar has 4 3-hit games. That is absurd to begin a month after Gunnar was, June and July a little bit slower, especially coming out of the All-Star break, not playing recently at the MVP pace we saw from him in the first half, but he's not cranking homers at the same rate, but the hits are coming in bunches once again. And of course, he's hitting them hard, as we usually see from Gunnar Henderson. Now, what went wrong for the Orioles on Saturday night? Well, that was really the 2 big Rays innings. And I'm talking about the 5th and the 8th for Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa only scored 1 in the 8th, so I don't know if you're calling it a huge inning, but they did put together 3 in the 5th to get themselves right back in this game. Corbin Burns was rolling along, 4 scoreless and hitless innings to begin this one. And then things just got away from him in the 5th. He gave up his first hit. He allowed a few stolen bases. He allowed a bunch of doubles to the bottom of the Rays order. And all of a sudden, a 4-0 Orioles lead became 4-3 before Corbin could finally end the 5th inning, still with the lead intact, but completely changed that game. I mean, he was truly rolling along in those first 4 innings, and then it didn't come to him. Some of his pitch selection, his command was a little questionable, and that's why he gave up those 3 runs. But I also know that people are really worried about the stolen bases. He gave up a couple of them in that 5th inning, and Corbin has now allowed 33 stolen bases. I believe it's like 10 or 12 more than the second place guy, Mackenzie Gore, who's given up like 20-ish. That's concerning, right? By far the most stolen bases given up in baseball. But he's always given up some stolen bases, not nearly as much as this year. The new rules certainly help. But Burns has said on the record, like, it's not an issue for him. He is focused on getting the batter out, and Corbin Burns has been good enough where he can say that. I mean, he ended up coming back out in the 6th and dominating after a really bad 5th. Retired the side in order with 2 strikeouts. Ended the day 6 innings, 3 runs, 4 hits, 5 Ks, and a walk on 98 pitches. And he's got a 2.71 ERA this season in an Oriole uniform. So if he's doing things like that, I don't mind if a guy gets on with a 1-out single that he might not automatically, but somewhat close to automatically wind up at second base sometimes because guys are stealing. And again, it's on Burns because he is so slow to the plate, but that is the trade-off here. His ability to be slow to the plate or his wind up slow to the plate allows him to throw harder, have nastier stuff, and get the guy out at the plate. And generally throughout the year, when you have a 2.71 ERA, it means even if guys are stealing 33 bases on you and it's only mid-August, probably means you're getting a lot of outs at home plate and you don't have to worry about a lot of their stolen bases. And that's been the case this year. And I get that people are worried that, it's going to come up in a playoff game, right? He's going to be pitching it's going to be a 2-1 lead in the 6th. And he's going to allow a 1-out single. And all of a sudden that guy's going to be at third base and completely change the game. Like something like that could certainly happen when it's this extreme with the stolen bases that Burns is allowing. But with his stuff, I trust that he will keep runners off the base paths in general enough, like he's done all year, to still be the go-to reliable ace that the Orioles need, not just right now, but also when it comes postseason time. I think we can all agree on that. And certainly, if Burns was like a, high 3s, 4 ERA guy who was like the number 3 starter in the Orioles rotation and was like looking like he was going to start a playoff game, but not necessarily the ace, that's where I'd be super concerned. It was like, wow, this guy, doesn't get a whole lot of strikeouts. He lets some runners on base. And when he does, it gets out of hand too often. That's when it becomes an issue. But when you're Corbin Burns and probably number 2 in Cy Young running behind Tarek Skubal right now in the American League, it's not as much of an issue. I trust Burns. If it's his one flaw, it's his one flaw. And the other thing with stolen bases is even though they are up with the new rules that have come in to allow more stolen bases, they are still a risky proposition. Guys across baseball aren't stealing bags at a high enough rate yet, even with the new rules, to make them analytically worth it. Like potentially giving up that out on the bases is too high of a risk for most teams. And I will tell you, once you get to the postseason, when data shows team rely more on home runs to score their runs because the pitching gets even better, and the outs you are giving up mean even more in the playoffs, teams are going to be less inclined to try and steal bases to potentially waste that out. And I get it. If you can steal on Burns, you're going to be more likely than on another pitcher who's like average at holding runners, but they're going to run less in the postseason. Teams always do, especially when you're looking at how the data plays out. And that's how teams operate these days, especially the good teams. So that's why I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. Again, I would call it a minor issue at the moment, but Nothing really more than that. And hey, for Corbin Burns, I mean, he also had the velo up on all of his pitches on Saturday. So that was kind of fun to see as well. Now, the other big inning I was talking about was the eighth. The Orioles got a big top of the eighth inning. We'll talk about it. They led 7-4 heading into the bottom of the eighth. And Yennier Cano came on and he got the first two batters out. And then he allowed a little dribbler infield single, which happens to Cano because his sinker is so good. And then a little bloop single into the outfield. And all of a sudden it's first and third, 2 outs. Nothing he did wrong, made good pitches on both of those hits. But he comes out of the game with the lefty coming up. It was a switch hitter in Dylan Carlson, but it was Carlson who had homered off Cano in the ninth inning the night before. And if you're Brandon Hyde, you're like, I don't want that to happen again to potentially have this game become tied here in the eighth. So he goes to CNL Perez, which I thought was the right move there. You turn Carlson around. I think he's a little bit better from the left side anyway. And you go attack him and you get the final out of the inning. Well, Perez didn't make it easy. He walked a batter to load the bases. Then he walked another batter to bring in a run to make it a 7-5 game. They brought in Jose Caballero, who had already homered the inning before to tie the game at 4. And luckily, Caballero just missed a middle in fastball, flew out to left field to strand the bases loaded and keep it at a 7-5 game. But that got a little bit dicey. And yeah, shout out to Sir Anthony Dominguez, who came in and got the save in the ninth, and the Orioles secured a 7-5 win. But it got a little dicey in that fifth and that eighth inning. Yeah, you don't love it, but a win is a win. And shout out to, for that Saturday win, the bottom two in the Orioles order. That would be Jackson Holliday and Ramone Aras. Now, it was another home run for Jackson Holliday, and this one, just like we talked about with Mullins on Friday, was off a left-hander as he got Tyler Alexander for a solo shot in the second to put the Orioles up 4-0. Holliday just continues to mash the baseball since getting recalled. And then, as I mentioned, the Orioles gave up the lead. It was a 4-4 game heading into the top of the eighth. And all of a sudden, it was Ramone Aras who played offensive hero in this game. A 2-run homer off the lefty Colin Poche out to left center field puts the Orioles right back on top 6-4 in the eighth inning. And listen, like Aras hit 341 in July. He was awesome. Now, he wasn't playing every day, and Westberg was out there for most of that time as well. But Aras did not have a hit in the month of August until this series. Then he ended up with one hit on Friday night, got the start in that one. Goes 2 for 5 with the home run on Saturday. Now, in Sunday's game, his only plate appearance, he ended up striking out. And it's still been a little bit of a struggle overall in August. But Kobe Mayo's struggling right now. I mean, he got pinch hit for in Sunday's game. He still doesn't have a hit. He's looking kind of close to how Jackson Holliday looked in his first stint, just kind of overmatched and guessing too much. And he's had some defensive miscues at third base. Mayo only started one of the 3 games at the Trop this weekend and came out in the 6th inning of the game he did start on Sunday. It's a possibility that Mayo would go back down to AAA, maybe even before the O's return home on Tuesday to take on the Nats. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on tomorrow's episode. But whether that happens or not, the Orioles are going to be relying a good chunk on Ramone Aras until Jordan Westburg comes back, hopefully in mid to late September from that broken hand. And the fact that Aras had a really good July, and even though he was struggling a bit in August, came up with that huge game-winning home run. If he can just produce a little bit and play a solid third base at the bottom of the order, with Holliday now producing and the other bats getting hot again, the O's can get there and win this division if Aras once in a while can have a swing like that. And I did also just want to mention, like, that lead was given up in the 7th. Burt Smith pitched the bottom of the 7th inning. Now, it was against the bottom of the Rays order, but it was a 4-3 lead in the 7th. And Burt Smith, although he's been pitching well since the Orioles picked him up from the Marlins, hasn't exactly been a high leverage reliever. But the way he's pitched, Brandon Hyde just kind of went ahead and gave him that shot. Now, he got the other 3 batters out that he faced, just unfortunately gave up a solo homer to Jose Caballero to tie the game. First of all, that pitch, while it wasn't great, it was a high slider. It was out of the zone, and Caballero somehow went up there and smacked it out over the wall in left field. But even though Burt Smith didn't come through with the hold and he gave up the lead, it was interesting to see Hyde go to Burt Smith in that spot. And I think we're going to see that a little bit more here as the O's try and figure out, okay, who are our high leverage guys? Who are our guys pitching well, pitching not well, with the injuries they're dealing with the struggles of Kimbrel and a guy like Gregory Soto who came over. Burt Smith could be a factor and was definitely kind of interesting to see how he had really entered Brandon Hyde's circle of trust and gotten that spot on Saturday. But then the O's went into Sunday with a chance to sweep this series. And they did have the lead heading into the 7th inning of this game. Unfortunately, couldn't pull out the victory. And I'll tell you why to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Ibata. Are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? With Ibata, you can get cash back on all of your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user, they earn $256 per year. Sounds pretty good to me. And while other apps give you points that don't mean much, Ibata earns cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account. I love hearing that. It's time to join over the 50 million users who use Ibata. And right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app, start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Now, I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But now the Olympics are officially over. It's basically just Major League Baseball every night until football starts. While I love having baseball every night, you can go to the FanDuel app and you can dream up bets about anything, anytime you're in that sports mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer at FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So for the Orioles, they had a chance to sweep this series. Unfortunately, couldn't do it, falling 2-1 on Sunday to wrap up the series, still with a victory, but the Rays did get their one and only one win against the Orioles at the Trop this year. It was 6-1 at the Trop. That's pretty good. But let's talk about what went right on Sunday, and that was Albert Suarez. He continues to outdo himself. The best start of his major league career. 6 2/3 scoreless innings for Suarez on 4 hits. He struck out 5 and walked 1 on 94 pitches. Now, it wasn't like it didn't involve a little bit of luck for Albert Suarez. There were 12 hard hit balls against him, and the Rays certainly squared him up a good amount of times, but they found outfielders when he needed them to. He got the big strikeouts when he needed to. It was the longest start of Suarez's MLB career. He recorded an out in the 7th for the first time since 2016 with the Giants, and then got another one before coming out of the game. It was just kind of, here's my fastball around the top of the zone, try and hit it. And the Rays, for most of the game, just could not hit it. Now, they did barrel it up a few times, but 11 whiffs on that fastball, 5 on the cutter, which looked more like a nasty slider at times. Man, I mean, I don't know if you can trust or expect Albert Suarez to do this every time out, but listen, he threw 5 scoreless in the spot start. I mean, last minute when Grayson Rodriguez was scratched in Toronto on Tuesday. Then he goes 6 2/3 on Sunday. I mean, to pitch like that right now, there was still a question about, okay, is this Albert Suarez's rotation spot until Grayson comes back? I mean, they're hoping for Grayson back maybe in early to mid-September. So you're looking at another month with that spot in the rotation. Unless something drastically changes after these last 2 starts, this is Albert Suarez's spot. He is the number 5 starter, and you could argue maybe the number 3 or 4 starter in this rotation right now. Like, this is maybe short-sighted because he's had his struggles this year at times too. But the current version of the Orioles rotation is Albert Suarez the number 3 starter. Like, the way everyone is pitching, Burns the clear number 1, Eflin the clear number 2. I think I trust Suarez going out there over Trevor Rogers and Dean Kramer right now. So yeah, of course, let's give Albert Suarez the ball every 5 days. And that is exactly what happened. And again, don't expect him to pitch like this, 5-6 scoreless every single time he goes out there for the next month. But if he can do anything close to it and keep the O's in games, that is going to be huge with all of these starting pitching injuries, and adding Grayson Rodriguez to that mix, even though the O's got semi-positive news on him, and I'll get to that on tomorrow's episode. They're still going to be without him for a few weeks here, and Suarez could be a huge addition to this rotation. Now, I know there was issues with when he came out of the game. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, what went wrong? Well, the starting pitching was great. The other areas of the game, the offense and the bullpen, that is what went wrong on Sunday for the Orioles. Anthony Santander, 35th home run of the year, solo shot off Jeffrey Springs in the 5th, put the Orioles up 1-0, tied him for second in baseball with Ohtani and Ozuna behind Judge in homers. That was the Orioles' only offense in this game. And that is always going to be an issue because it is very, very hard to win baseball games with one run. Now, they did have 9 hits. Those missed out on some chances. They only drew 1 walk in this game. Santander was the offense. Brandon Hyde, I think, used Ryan O'Hearn in the 6th and Adley Rutschman in the 8th in perfect pinch hitting spots, 2 on and 2 out. O'Hearn was trying to extend the lead. Adley was trying to give them the lead back after the game had been tied 1-1. And both guys flew out and did not come through in those pinch hitting spots where O'Hearn and Adley have been money every time they've pinch hit this season. And then beyond that, the bullpen just didn't get it done. Now, the O's bullpen was in a weird place because I think it's become clear over the past few days the 2 most trusted relievers in the Orioles bullpen by Brandon Hyde are Yennier Cano and Seranthony Dominguez. The Orioles used both of them to pick up the wins in Friday and Saturday night's game, and we know the O's are not going to be throwing guys 3 days in a row. So Dominguez and Cano were both down. Now, you still had 6 available relievers, but with the state of the Orioles bullpen, Coulomb still out, Jacob Webb now on the injured list. You're not in a place where you're trusting Craig Kimbrell or Gregory Soto at this moment. There's not a lot of great options out there. So the Orioles bullpen was already behind the 8 ball. Now, that being said, it was still the right call to go to CNL Perez when the Orioles did in the 7th. Albert Suarez was at 90 pitches through 6 scoreless. It's a 1-0 game. I was even surprised they sent him back out there for the 7th. Remember, he's never gotten an out in the 7th in his career. He's 3rd time through the order. He's been getting hit hard. Things could get out of hand. And he got himself 2 key outs to the first 2 righties that he faced in the 7th. Then the lefty comes up. Seemed like the perfect time to go to the pen. CNL Perez, who was a little shaky on Saturday, but was still available Sunday. And you'd rather Suarez not face another lefty. You want to go get the lefty to get the matchup. And it's a perfect spot for Perez. Nobody on base and 2 outs. It's just go get an out. And the even better part here is CNL Perez, despite the struggles he's had at times, has still not allowed a home run all season, which means if you're Brandon Hyde, you know, for CNL Perez to blow this lead, he has to, at the very least, give up back-to-back hits with one of those hits being an extra base hit before recording 1 out. That is the only way to blow the lead, and the chances of that happening, not very high. Unfortunately, as like happens in baseball a lot, things that don't have very high chances of happening still do happen. And that's what happened to Perez. He gives up a double, then a bloop RBI single, gets a pop out to end the inning, but that tied the game at 1. And, the Rays used a couple of pinch hitters against Perez to do that. I mean, the bloop single was the bloop single. It happens. It's unfortunate, but that was Perez's spot and a fairly easy high leverage spot to just get one more out against the bottom of the order and pinch hitters and get out of it. And he just did not do it. And Danny Coulomb or Jacob Webb would certainly be your guy in that spot. Coulomb a lefty, Webb a righty, but who gets lefties out at a better clip would have been your guy there. Both of them are on the injured list. So you're looking at Keegan Aiken, Gregory Soto, and CNL Perez as your lefties in the bullpen right now. And Aiken is not going to be in any leverage, I don't think. And Soto's been struggling since the trade. So I think we would all agree Perez is your most trustworthy lefty in the Orioles bullpen right now. That's why I had no problem really with the move that was made. He just didn't get the outs. But then because Perez struggled to even finish the inning with the score still tied at 1, you put yourself in a really tough spot moving forward, because then you're down Perez, you're down Cano, and you're down Dominguez. And then you're like, are we down our 3 best relievers right now? And I would argue yes, in a 1-1 game in the 8th inning. And I think Hyde again made the move I would have made, which was just go to Craig Kimbrell. Like, we know the struggles recently, but in low leverage spots, he had put up 3 consecutive scoreless innings. So he was trending in the right direction, even though it hadn't been big pressure spots. And you bring him in there, middle of the order, 1-1 game, bottom 8. It's just like, find a way to get a 0. Doesn't have to be pretty, just find a way. And honestly, he didn't give up a hit. Like, he didn't get crushed, but it was the same thing that's been killing Kimbrell. The command is just not there right now. I mean, the walks, the intentional walk, because you kind of had to. He gives up the sac fly. He does get a big strikeout to strand runners and keep it a 2-1 game and give the O's at least a chance in the top of the 9th inning. But you can still see from the stuff, like, even though he's throwing 92 to 94 now and not 98, when he throws that high spin fastball at the top of the zone, it's still unhittable. Like, you saw it in Sunday's game when he was able to locate the fastball at the top of the zone. That was where all 3 of the swing and misses he got on the fastball came on Sunday. Here's the issue, though. His command is so off that he can't consistently get that pitch to the top of the zone. It leaks out of the zone for a ball, or it leaks down to the middle of the plate when it becomes more hittable. And when you're adding that in with base runners already and walks, and the fact that he gave up 4 stolen bases in that inning because he just always has been too slow to the plate to hold runners in his career, it's a bad combination for Kimbrell right now. And I don't know if the Orioles need Kimbrel to get back to his good closer level when he had the 19 straight scoreless appearances. That would certainly be nice for this bullpen if he got back to that level. But at the very least, he needs to get back to the level where, remember last time he came out of the closer role and he at least became like a good seventh inning guy for a few weeks before he got the ninth inning back? The Orioles at least need that, and they don't even have that right now from Craig Kimbrel. And that is making it a tough spot for the bullpen. I mean, you're really looking at, if you don't go Kimbrel there, Gregory Soto, Brian Baker, Keegan Aiken, Burt Smith, like those are your choices. I think they were honestly saving Burt Smith for the ninth because I think Brandon Hyde might have gone to Smith for the save because he was the reliever left available that Hyde trusted the most. So they went to Kimbrel in the eighth. Yeah, it's still been a struggle. And the shout out for Sunday's game, I just wanted to give a shout out to Pete Fairbanks. I know he's not an Oriole. He came in and got the save in the top of the ninth to clinch the one win for the Rays. But I mean, shout out to Cedric Mullins for getting a 2-out single on him and put some pressure in that one-run game. But Fairbanks is nasty as ever. Now, he struck out 3 batters in that inning. But on the strikeouts against Jackson Holliday and Colton Cowser, he threw them some of the most ridiculous and nasty 93 and 94 mile per hour changeups that you will ever see. Coming into this game Sunday, Fairbanks had thrown only 11 changeups all season. That is 1.8% of the pitches he had thrown. That is how much other teams, especially teams like the Rays, respect and fear these Orioles young hitters, that he's coming out of nowhere with that new pitch just to get Jackson Holliday and Colton Cowser out right now. And it worked. Those are some of the most disgusting pitches I've seen all year in Major League Baseball. But it shows you how the league sees the Orioles. It is a dangerous lineup with dangerous young hitters, and Fairbanks had to go way into his bag to escape that ninth inning with the Rays win. But that is what happened. Still, the O's get a big series win. Unfortunately, the Rangers could not complete their comeback. They scored 1 in the 6th, 2 in the 7th, 3 in the 8th, 1 in the 9th, had 2nd and 3rd with 2 outs against Clay Holmes, who Aaron Boone, for some reason, allowed to throw 45 pitches in Sunday's game. But the Yankees unfortunately held on for an 8-7 win over the Rangers, took that series, and again, division tied heading into Monday. And on Monday, the Orioles have the day off. They're back in action Tuesday against the Nats, but I've still got an episode coming Tuesday. We're breaking down all the roster moves recently, all the injury news recently, from Grayson Rodriguez to Jacob Webb, Jordan Westberg, and others, and the minor league signings like J.D. Davis and why he could be in Baltimore pretty soon here. That's all coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.